My name is Cloepfil. I'm the founder of Allied Works Architecture, which I think I started in 1994. In 2003, we opened the office in New York. Most of the work that we do is cultural work, creative work, museums and various cultural institutions, cultural institutions for education, and then some creative business headquarters, residences. But even the residences are usually for significant art collectors. So generally the work is in the creative realm, which is fantastic. To me, architecture is something visceral. It's something tangible and tactile. It's certainly much more about experience than it is about shape or even theory and ideas. It's an immediate art. It's an immediate art that provides reference, that clarifies relationships, that can reveal certain aspects of a place or activity that no other art can. And I think another thing that renders architecture particular, specific in the arts, is that it's a made thing. It's based on a tradition of construction and making that's an ongoing dialogue for thousands of years, so it's rooted in a kind of history of making, and that history of making, I think, has informed most of the significant ideas in architecture over the centuries. Today, there is a lot of pressure for architecture to represent new form or to be a product of new manufacturing techniques. And I think all those things are wonderful. But for me, the primary responsibility of architecture and the primary possibility of architecture is to create awe, to establish a sense of wonder, a sense of provide a kind of emotional range in the world that no other art can provide. I think architects and architecture is best at clarifying things. I think there's sort of many camps of architecture, obviously, in that way. And I think architects have always tried to be propositional, to be proposers of new ideas, but I actually think they're best at condensing and filtering and compacting and concentrating ideas. Innovation is less of a concern to me than specificity. I think each project, each problem, each city, each context offers its own set of solutions and its own kind of material possibilities. Each city has its own character, each climate has its own nature. So I think the more specific we can make the buildings, the more resonant they are, the more they communicate the possibilities of architecture in that particular place and particular culture. So it's not a drive to make new things, but it's a drive to make excruciatingly specific things. Architecture fundamentally is about relationships. I mean, I think everything, as human beings, our nature, we're relational by nature, and so much of the world and how one discovers new possibilities is through people. The importance of the internet for the office is probably the same as any other, form of expression. I mean, it's just communication. And I think for us and, another small group of architects, once you start doing international work, I think it's huge. I mean, it's how people find out about your work. It's how you communicate what you're doing. It's so interesting when you think of 10 years ago. I know firms that didn't even have websites, and now you look at the communication that goes on, like your journal, like your blog. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So if you're considering going into architecture, I think two or three things are incredibly important now, and perhaps more important now than at other moments in history. And I think, well, faculty is always key. Like, who's there that's interesting, who's committed to teaching, not just showing up and having their name associated with the school, like, as we all know is part of what happens today, I think. But who are the really good teachers, and how long have they been there, and how committed? Or, I think that is the ultimate measure of a school. But I also think that the school needs to have a broad relationship with the other arts and other fields. Landscape architecture in particular, fine arts program. I mean, architecture used to be much, much narrower, I think, or has been much, much narrower in the history of architecture education. But I think now it's crucial that you share ideas and possibilities with other creative fields. Absolutely crucial. And so I think schools that are just architecture schools or who don't cultivate relationships with the arts and the other arts are at a loss. You have to have ultimate passion. You have to love making architecture. You have to love drawing. You have to love the labor of architecture, the absolute craft of architecture, because it's an incredibly difficult field to sustain yourself. I think so much passion coming out of the schools, and then encountering so much difficulty in actually being allowed to use your abilities in the physical world. So I think it takes an uncommon commitment, kind of blind commitment. And then it also takes, kind of back to one of your early questions, it takes an ability to communicate. I mean, you have to be verbal. I mean, again, whether you're an artist or a filmmaker or an architect, you have to be able to explain your work and discuss your work. So without the verbal ability and the kind of passion, there's lots of other things to do.